You've spent the last 8 hours staring at your phone's GPS, watching the blue dot follow the road perfectly, trusting it completely. Now imagine that dot doesn't exist. Imagine there's no satellite, no cell tower, no glowing screen telling you where to go. Imagine you're standing in a landscape you've never seen before and you need to reach a specific destination hundreds of miles away. You don't panic, you don't freeze, you just know where to go. For almost the entire history of human existence, this wasn't a superpower, it was just Tuesday. This is how ancient humans navigated without maps, and the answer is so much more sophisticated than you probably think. Let's start with what most people assume. Most people assume that ancient humans were basically lost all the time. They think our ancestors wandered around randomly, stumbling into new territory by accident, memorizing stuff through pure repetition. Wrong on almost every level. Ancient humans were actually incredibly sophisticated navigators, so sophisticated that some of their techniques are still more reliable than GPS in certain situations. But here's what's weird about ancient navigation. It wasn't one thing. It was dozens of things working together simultaneously, and understanding how they did it requires us to completely recalibrate how we think about human intelligence. The first thing to understand is that ancient humans weren't memorizing maps in their heads. They were memorizing something way more detailed and way more useful. They were memorizing the narrative of the landscape. This is called a journey narrative or a songline, and it basically works like this. You don't remember that a river bends left at the oak tree. Instead, you remember a story about a river spirit that dances around the oak tree. You don't remember that a mountain has a specific shape visible from the valley. You remember a legend about why that mountain looks like a giant's sleeping face. The story encoding the navigation information is so much more memorable than raw data that you could forget it if you tried. Indigenous Australian peoples used songlines that encoded thousands of miles of navigation information into musical structures that could be sung and remembered across generations. Some of these songlines described routes of over 2,000 miles using nothing but rhythm, melody, and metaphor. That's insane. That's an ancient human essentially creating a neural compression algorithm that turns abstract spatial information into something the human brain naturally retains. But here's where it gets more interesting. Ancient humans weren't just remembering stories. They were actively reading their environment in real time using systems that are so reliable they make modern navigation look fragile by comparison. Take celestial navigation. You look up at the night sky, you see patterns. Most people see random dots. Ancient navigators saw a three-dimensional coordinate system, the position of stars, the angle of their rise and set, the changing constellations throughout the year, the way planets moved through the zodiac. All of this became usable data. Polynesian navigators became so proficient at reading the stars that they sailed across the entire Pacific Ocean without maps or compasses, using nothing but star positions and the position of ocean swells. They could determine latitude within a degree of accuracy by identifying which stars were visible at their specific angle above the horizon. They could determine longitude by tracking which constellations appeared in which sequence at what times of year. These weren't primitive techniques. These were advanced mathematics expressed through observation and memory. But wait, there's something even more fascinating about how ancient navigators used the ocean itself. Ocean swells. The Pacific Ocean has multiple current systems that create consistent patterns of waves moving in different directions. These wave patterns don't disappear at night. They don't require the sun. A skilled navigator could feel the direction and intensity of wave patterns by sitting in a boat and could triangulate position by feeling how multiple swell systems intersected. Imagine that. You're in the middle of an endless ocean. You close your eyes, you feel the boat moving beneath you, and through pure tactile sensation and spatial reasoning, you calculate where you are. This technique is so reliable that modern sailors have tested it and confirmed that it works. One of the most mind-bending aspects of ancient navigation is that it required almost no equipment. No sextant, no chronometer, no map, no compass. Just observation, just memory, just pattern recognition, which means it was immune to the failures that plague modern navigation. Your GPS needs a battery. Your map needs to be accurate. Your compass can be affected by magnetic anomalies. Ancient navigation systems didn't have failure points because the information was distributed across multiple redundant systems that were backed up in stories, songs, and pure observation. But there's another layer here that most people miss. Ancient humans weren't just navigating by reading the sky or the ocean. They were navigating by reading the landscape itself, and they did this through what's called cognitive mapping. This is the ability to build a mental model of space based on direct experience and then use that model to navigate through new areas. The way it works is this. You travel a route multiple times. Your brain builds a detailed three-dimensional map of that route that includes not just visual information, but also auditory information, olfactory information, tactile information, temperature changes, the way sound echoes, the way air moves, the specific quality of light at different times of day. After traveling a route maybe 5 or 6 times, you could navigate it in complete darkness. You could navigate it while blindfolded. You could navigate it while sleeping because the information isn't stored as a visual image. It's stored as a complete sensory experience. Ancient humans would then extend this technique to unfamiliar territory by borrowing someone else's cognitive map through conversation and instruction. An experienced navigator would travel with a younger navigator and would literally walk them through the territory, narrating it continuously, embedding their sensory experience into the younger person's brain. After maybe 1 or 2 journeys with a guide, you had absorbed enough sensory information to navigate independently. This was how knowledge was transferred, not through written instruction, but through embodied experience. Here's where this gets really strange. Archaeological evidence suggests that some ancient human populations had navigation systems so sophisticated that they traveled deliberately to places they couldn't see. The Polynesian settlement of remote Pacific islands, the Aboriginal Australian settlement of inland deserts, the Native American migration across the Bering Strait and down the coast of North America. These weren't accidents, these were intentional expeditions to places that required navigating across featureless terrain or empty ocean, which means ancient humans weren't just reacting to their environment. They were planning routes through environments they'd never seen before, based on mathematical reasoning about how the world should be structured. If a star rises here at this angle, then traveling in this direction should eventually reach land. If ocean swells intersect at this pattern, then land must be in this direction. If a landscape has this elevation, then water should flow in this direction. Ancient humans were running simulations in their heads using incomplete information and basic physics. And here's the thing that should actually blow your mind. We know this worked because we can trace the results. We have archaeological evidence of human settlement in Australia dating back 65,000 years, which required ocean navigation. We have evidence of humans settling remote Pacific islands thousands of years before reliable written records existed. We have evidence that these weren't lucky accidents because the settlement patterns show deliberate expansion strategies that suggest planned exploration, which means ancient humans weren't stumbling around lost. They were engaged in systematic exploration of the entire planet using navigation techniques that required sophisticated understanding of astronomy, oceanography, geography, and mathematics, all developed without writing, without instruments, without maps. The real question isn't how did ancient humans navigate without maps? The real question is why do we need maps at all? We need maps because modern human cognition has atrophied. We've outsourced navigation to technology. We no longer build detailed cognitive maps because we don't have to. We no longer read the landscape because we don't need to. We no longer navigate by the stars because we have satellites. And the result is that modern humans are actually worse navigators than ancient humans. You put a modern person in an unfamiliar territory without a GPS and they panic. You put an ancient human in the same territory and they start reading, they start observing, they start remembering, they build a mental model and they navigate by that model. This isn't because ancient humans had bigger brains or better intelligence. It's because they trained their attention, they developed skill, they outsourced navigation not to technology, but to their own cognitive capacity. Ancient humans navigated without maps because they didn't need maps. They needed attention. They needed curiosity. They needed the ability to observe patterns in complex systems and extract meaning from those patterns. They needed memory and the discipline to maintain it. They needed the confidence to trust their own observations, even when those observations contradicted their expectations. These aren't ancient skills. These are human skills, the techniques we've lost because we've found easier alternatives. And here's what's interesting about that. Those ancient navigation techniques are still available to us. You can still navigate by the stars. You can still build cognitive maps. You can still read a landscape for signs of direction and distance. The knowledge hasn't disappeared. We've just chosen not to use it, which means the next time you're standing somewhere unfamiliar and you feel lost, remember this. You're not actually lost. You've just forgotten how to read. And that's a choice you can change right now.